Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 291 of the Fun with Cars and Other... Fun with Cars Formula One and Other Motorsports podcast, or episode 25 of 2021. I'm Robin Warner, and today I'm joined by the man who's never left his kids alone at the pool. Yet. Christopher Roche. Hey, Chris.
Robin, how are you doing?
I'm just tickled pink that we can meet and have a chat together, and by meet I mean virtually with various technology in play.
Right, good.
It is Monday afternoon, June 28th, and Chris and I are going to talk about the Styrian Grand Prix, which is not the Austrian Grand Prix, because the Austrian Grand Prix is next week, held at the same track, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Chris, where shall we begin?
Well, you brought it up. I thought the Styrian anthem was particularly amusing. Full lederhosen, lovely vistas of the Austrian countryside, which is very pretty, but I did have a good old chuckle at that one, I must admit.
I have been to Austria once, and I was kind of shocked at how pretty it was. Not that I didn't expect it to be pretty or anything like that, but that it really has this kind of like mountains in the background, rolling hills, countryside kind of vibe. I was in a nice part of Austria, of course, not far from Bavaria, but still, it's a lovely, lovely place.
Oh, absolutely. I just it looked like a scene from a tourist board advert, though, didn't it? At some point.
Yeah, well, you know, it's the Styrian hillside? Is it Styrian mountains range? What Styria, or is that just like the state that they're in? Where is the Styrian connection? I should know this. I shouldn't be asking you, but
yeah, I mean, the only thing I've come across before is hysteria, but as far as Styrian geography, I'm completely drawn a blank, so I'll have to bone up on it and inform you on another pod, but I have nothing intelligent to add to that.
We can crowdsource that one. If we have any Styrian listeners, please let us know. And if we have any listeners that know, then that would be lovely. I thought it was just like the Styrian region of Austria, and that was the name, but that is just me making a guess.
So let's get some news out of the way. I've got great news. Changes to the track layout at Abu Dhabi. Did you hear about this?
No.
Yeah, so we talked about it after the last race there, and we complained about it.
Parts to that track, yeah.
And they must have heard us, Robin. They must have listened to the pod and heard us, because they've gone ahead and they've made changes, and they're quite significant. So it affects all parts of the track. Well, three main sections of the track. Let me correct. But it's not just tinkering with like curbing at one turn. So turn 7, they're eliminating a chicane and making the track wider. Turn 11, so turn 7 was originally referred to as the hairpin, so they had a chicane before the hairpin, that's gone, and the track's wider. And then at turn 11, which is called the South Marina section, there are actually 4 corners that are being consolidated into one sweeping banked turn.
Wow.
And then from corner 17, again, multiple corners affected, this is the hotel section. They're increasing the radius to try and make it a faster section. So there's some pretty cool graphics you can check out online for it. But it sounds like a really good step in the right direction. So it's great that both the track owners and F1 are making attempts to improve the raceability of certain tracks that are known issues. I mean, this track's been a problem for a decade, right? And so finally they're getting around to something. So that's good. That's positive.
Well, the other thing, more good news.
Oh, okay. I had 2 more items, but you go. Let's alternate.
Oh, well, we might be overlapping then. But the Turkish Grand Prix is back.
That's right. Turkish Grand Prix is back, which is a great track. It looked like the travel restrictions for the UK-based teams were the problem there, and that's changed, so it's back on the calendar. So that's good news. And if we stick with the track theme here, we are going to have a full capacity crowd at Silverstone, which is going to be fun.
I am going to fly out there and set up an iced tea stand, and it's going to be the beginning. It's going to be the beginning of a revolution.
Oh, well, I'm afraid the COVID restrictions in the UK still prevent you personally from travelling there, and no iced tea sales. So,
but I am fully vaccinated, sir. I am fully vaccinated. Who do I reach out to the Queen directly, or is there like an intermediary that I discuss this with? Because
all right, good. Well, good luck with that plan. We may never hear from you again, but should we talk about qualifying?
Well, the crowd at Silverstone is going to be fantastic. I mean, certainly, I'm very happy that we're starting to get some normalcy back. I'm in this really weird place with the pandemic because my own paranoia about things and family issues. So I don't know exactly how to react to those things precisely, but certainly the more we can get to normal, the better. And in the long run, as long as we can keep it that way, that's just great news. And let's, on that happy note, segue off to Bottas's penalty.
Oh, the FP2 spin. That was quite...
FP2 was it? Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But it earned him a three-place grid penalty. So
that's what it was. It was a spin in FP2, which meant that he got a three-place starting grid penalty. That's
exactly. And it was pretty comical, wasn't it? So he came into his pit box. I can't remember if they changed tyres or not, but then he gunned it on the way out, and he claimed that they'd been changing some settings on the car, diff, things like that, and it caught him out. And so he did a nice little pirouette right in front of the McLaren garage, and McLaren were quickly complaining about it, saying how utterly dangerous it was. So yes, he got a penalty for it, and he was not too happy.
That's gonna turn around and bite McLaren. I have a feeling that one. That's a what goes around comes around kind of a thing.
Absolutely, yeah. But qualifying itself wasn't that close, was it? Max Verstappen in the Red Bull proved to be just a little too quick for everybody, including Mr. Hamilton. He was comfortably on pole position by more than a couple of tenths of a second.
Well, he's the only one that got into the threes. I think he did a 3.8, and everyone else was 4.0 and slower.
Yeah,
1 minute,
exactly.
1 minute 3.8 versus 1 minute and 4 or slower.
Yeah, so Hamilton gave it his best. He actually did 3 runs in Q3, but that wasn't good enough to usurp Verstappen or even his teammate. So Bottas actually set the second quickest time, and got himself 5th place on the grid with his 3-place penalty. The other highlights for me were obviously Norris managing to secure a second row spot with 4th, which was a good effort in getting ahead of Perez.
Which meant a 3rd place starting position.
Right, exactly. And then a couple of other notables were Tsunoda comfortably in the top 10, 8th place, although he also got a 3-place grid penalty for holding up Bottas on one of his flying laps. And then George Russell, 11th, was phenomenal, 0.08 of a second off making Q3.
Yep.
And he ended up starting in 10th because of Tsunoda's penalty. But that Williams, both on the Saturday and Sunday, is now starting to look pretty respectable. It's getting up into the midfield battle. So I was very pleased for George after Saturday's qualifying.
So one thing about qualifying, and obviously we're going to talk about this when we get to the race as well, and you're going to love this, but Honda Power. They really seem to have, these last couple of Grand Prix, the French Grand Prix, and now we're seeing it again here. It seems like Honda might have the most powerful power unit now.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly looks that way, but from what I understand, you're not allowed to do power upgrades anymore. So the latest Honda power unit had some tweaks that were more to do with reliability, and I guess they changed the oil formulation. But
they wanted to make it reliably faster, so they added more power. Is that not how that works?
No. Apparently, Toto Wolff himself has said that it's all above board, and Honda aren't doing anything against the rules. They're certainly not going the Ferrari route to more performance. But it's certainly true that the Red Bull Honda has definitely got quicker in a straight line, and they seem to be able to keep up their high level of cornering performance with a lower downforce setup than Mercedes can run. The rear wing is definitely skinnier, so I think you have to think about downforce and power combined rather than in isolation.
Absolutely.
And so the ability of the car to get away with a smaller rear wing and yet still be quickest over the lap is impressive. And certainly Mercedes are struggling to figure out how to combat that at the moment.
Yeah, and that was the counter that I was expecting from you, is that, well, hey, it's a lower downforce, hence lower drag car, and that might be the difference. And that very well could be that is the lion's share of it. But I think the correct thing to say ultimately is that Red Bull Racing seems to have the quickest car in a straight line at this moment, and that includes even when someone behind has DRS. That is no longer a guarantee that you're going to whip right past that Red Bull Racing car. So that is a huge leg up in terms of being able to qualify well up in the grid and then defend your position in the race, even if your race pace isn't quite as good as the Mercedes or whomever. So I've been impressed where Red Bull's been able to develop this car. That Red Bull has a history of just phenomenal development. Adrian Newey is obviously extremely gifted when it comes to these things, but the fact that Red Bull started so much closer to having the quickest car and yet still seem to be able to develop at a rate, it seems like one way or the other, Red Bull Racing is out-developing Mercedes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think, Red Bull Honda is, with Max driving, is the quickest car-driver combination on the grid at the moment. Certainly it was in the Styrian Grand Prix. We never got to see the relative speeds on the straighter parts of the track with or without DRS, because Hamilton was never even close enough to look like trying to get a pass on Verstappen. Verstappen, got away from the start line into the lead at turn one and just disappeared. And he won by over 30 seconds, although Hamilton, of course, made an extra pit stop to get the fastest lap.
Correct.
But
yeah.
prior to his pit stop, Verstappen had pulled out like a 13-second lead, and it looked like the car was not only quicker, but it was also taking less life out of its tyres. Right, the tyre deg, which we've seen in the past. The story so far this season has really been that maybe Verstappen and the Red Bull are slightly quicker over one lap, but maybe the Mercedes and Hamilton are quicker over a race distance. Well, that's not what happened in the Styrian GP. Verstappen and the Red Bull were quicker over race distance too, and there was nothing that Hamilton and Mercedes could do about it. And they tried, and Hamilton certainly was giving it everything, and they looked at different scenarios. But yeah, it was the most dominant race win I've seen in some time by someone other than the Mercedes, and that's the fourth win on the bounce for Red Bull, and that's the longest fallow period that Mercedes have encountered since the hybrid era started. So 4 wins in a row.
This is weird to hear, isn't it? I mean, because you understand the hybrid started in 2014, that hybrid era. So
right, it's incredible.
It's incredible. So there's part of you that's got to be thinking the same thing I am, which is, wow, it's about time. But at the exact same time, there's something sad about it as well, because you're like, oh man, I'd hate to see this championship start feeling lopsided again, just, with a different team.
Yeah, I mean, I think I, like many people, was very excited to see, a really exciting championship battle, and we wanted to see that go on for as long as, for the entire season, not just over the course of the first 7-8 races. And it is, I'd hate to see Max just run away with it. I'm sure there are a lot of people who would love that, especially those that like to wear orange at the weekend. But no, and I don't think we're at that point yet. But certainly, it was surprising to see the ease with which Max won the race. And then, of course, we're going back to the Red Bull Ring for the Austrian Grand Prix this weekend. So you would expect. I know they're using different tyre compounds, so maybe that'll mix it up a little bit. Maybe the weather will will throw in another variable. But
yeah, it was very hot, much hotter than they were expecting this time around. So maybe cooler weather would make a difference as well.
That's right. But no, I mean, fair play to, as you were saying, to Red Bull and Newey and Verstappen and the Honda team. I mean, who would have thought that they would be leading the championship by a healthy margin at this point in the season after 2020, when Mercedes still looked to have a comfortably quicker car. It's an incredible turnaround.
Red Bull and this is has 40 points right now on Mercedes, 252 versus 212.
Right, and this is where Lewis is saying, look at all the upgrades that Red Bull are bringing to the car. We're not bringing anything. And they're talking about the fact that Mercedes really, their focus is on next season, 22, big regulation change. Of course, they also have the budget cap to contend with, and the fact that they also get less wind tunnel time than every other team on the grid.
Oh, good point. Yes, the new regulations and part of the cost cap. That's right.
Yeah, so you've got basically a perfect storm that Mercedes are having to deal with, and Red Bull appear to be taking advantage of it. And I think it's not good for the sport to be dominated by one team and one driver for as long as it has been. Quite honestly, there needs to be more competition, and so I'm sure that Stefano is very pleased. He's just become the boss of Formula One, and it's all going great. Someone else is winning,
and all his doing, absolutely.
Right.
Formula One is leaving Styria, and they're going off to Austria now. I hear the tracks are actually a bit similar, but do you think Mercedes can turn around their performance at this coming weekend at this new different track, since we're in Austria at Styria? I don't know how much farther I can bury this joke, but I'm going to keep going.
I think I think the likelihood is that Max is going to win the race again, unless that one of these, either the tyre or weather variables, plays a big element to it.
Yeah, but the fact that we have to talk about variables maybe causing a disruption for Red Bull, not for Mercedes, that in and of itself is very telling. Excuse me, and it does make me. I want to talk more about different teams throughout the Grand Prix, but looking at the schedule coming up, we have Silverstone, obviously, and then Hungary, so big and fast track, pretty darn tight track, and then Spa, the biggest track. Those are going to give, great. The Silverstone is high downforce, but also high speed. Hungary is low speed, very high downforce, and then Spa is lower downforce, incredibly high speed. Where do you see advantages coming and going in those different tracks? If Mercedes has the ability to have more downforce potentially and maintain straight line speed, this is just me speculating. Maybe Silverstone will be better for Mercedes.
Yeah, you'd like to think that Silverstone and Spa will suit the Mercedes chassis better than certainly some of the other tracks we visited recently, like Baku and Monaco. And that maybe we'll see more of like a France-like performance where you really don't know who's going to win, and it could go either way. And sort of strategy calls are going to really end up determining who gets the top step of the podium. But I think Hungary is an interesting one because it's a slow speed circuit, but yet Hamilton's always excelled there. He has always gone really well. So I don't know if that will nullify the Mercedes lack of low speed corner performance. We shall have to find out. But it's I think the thing to remember is that it's only one race. Hamilton's still less than a race win behind in points, and
18 points behind right now.
Yeah, that's right. So let's assume Max goes on and wins Austria, then it's still, and let's say it's a 7-point margin, it's only one win points differential, 25 points. So it's not the end of the world. But it does go to highlight how big a mistake it was with the magic brake bias button, because Hamilton would be able to weather this storm and still have maybe a points lead, but because he also didn't score in Baku, Max is now starting to pull ahead. So
I think it's important to get a little bit more precise with our language here. So this is my pedantic moment of this podcast. I don't think it was a big mistake from Hamilton at all. It was a significant mistake. It was the error was really small, but it's proving to be extremely significant because of all the other things that have happened and continue to happen.
Sure. I don't mind you correcting my language. I mean, ultimately, the fact that he didn't score.
Well, I am a native American speaker. I don't know about this English language and how things translate too well, but
yeah, I mean, the bottom line
is that's a joke because we speak English, and I'm just not. My jokes aren't landing today. I was hoping to get a bigger reaction from that one. Should I have like a rim shot app playing in the background so you know?
Yeah, I think you need a little drum, a little cymbal crash when you strike the jokes. Yeah, you got to score points, right? And if you don't, you're opening the door to the opposition.
But,
and
there was real potential based on the entry of Azerbaijan. That entry into turn one, it really looked like Hamilton could have taken the lead and gone on to win the race, and that would have been a 25-point swing. And now that we're progressing with more and more hindsight, we're just seeing how significant that magic button is proving to be.
Exactly. But what also struck me was how big a differential we're still seeing between the number 1 and 2 drivers for each of the respective top 2 teams. I mean, Perez, we all agree that he's doing a much better job in the Red Bull than the drivers that came before him. But he's still some way off Verstappen's pace and only finished 4th. Bottas, although out qualifying Hamilton, was also significantly slower than Lewis. I mean, that's a big old delta. I mean, they're comfortably ahead of. I mean, the performance of the top 2 teams relative to everyone else is massive. I mean, they lapped up to what, Norris?
Yeah. They lapped. I don't know if it was including Norris or not. I think it included Norris.
Okay, it was definitely up to Saints.
It was up to 5th. Yeah, so. The only people that finished on the lead lap were the 2 Mercedes and the 2 Red Bull racing cars.
Extraordinary. And it's a short lap. It's a 1 minute lap.
Yeah.
But even so, to lap the other 8 teams and 16 drivers, and yet there still being such a significant differential between the top 2 and the second 2 in those teams is quite remarkable, really.
That's not true. They did not lap the other 8 teams. They lapped Haas 3 times. So let's get that part correct.
Well, Mazepin's now got to spin that top, right?
That's not true. Oh, they only lapped Mick Schumacher twice. I stand corrected.
Well done, Mick. Well, yeah, but Gunther Steiner's now given Mazepin something to spin on the top of his steering wheel while he's driving an F1 car. That's pretty cruel, I think.
He couldn't spin a top, but he could spin his own car all the bloody time. When he shouldn't. That whole moment. Thank you for sending that to me. That was just priceless.
Yeah, for those who didn't see it, there was a lovely little video shared on Twitter of Gunther Steiner presenting Nikita Mazepin with a spinning top for him to play with. And basically, Gunther actually says, now you could spin this instead of the car. And he's only half joking. But, as you just pointed out, Mazepin couldn't actually spin the top. So he's got more talent at spinning the car. So amusing aside, I'm glad that Haas are able to find the funny side of their season because they're having a tough old year.
Well, and Gunther Steiner was the guest team principal for Sky Sports for this past broadcast, and he was quite blunt. He's like, they were saying, you must be counting the days until next year when you have new design. And so he's like, no, I'm not counting the days, I'm counting the hours. He knows he knows that this is embarrassing. I mean, they're clearly, you mentioned earlier in the episode about Williams showing real progress, especially in the hands of George Russell, and Haas is just buried down in the basement in terms of, and there's just zero development. So, Williams may or may not score a point this season, knock on wood that they do. I hope they do, but they're already shown ahead of Haas, and I'd be shocked if that changes.
Yeah, I mean, the gap now between Williams and Haas is extraordinary. I mean, it's got up to almost like a second around the Red Bull Ring. So
and again, short lap. We're talking about not much more than a minute and a second there. So what would that translate to at Spa? Speaking of,
right, exactly. And so they go in the way of Williams' 2019 vintage, where Williams were way off the back of the rest of the field. That's not great, is it? But anyway, I mean, the race. Let's continue through the order here. I mean, Norris was able to get 5th place.
I want to stop you right there.
Okay.
No. So real quick, just to put my 2 cents on it. I agree with you that there's a big delta between the teammates and Verstappen and Hamilton, but they absolutely delivered in terms of which teammate is supporting the team overall better. And that was an interesting battle between those two, and that Bottas was able to edge and hold off Perez at the end, literally by just a couple of tenths. That was good, compelling racing and interesting for the Constructors' Championship. When we get to Lando Norris, I want to first point out that Ricciardo had a terrible day qualifying, but he had a storming race the first few laps. He went from, I think he started 13th. He was running 8th just a few laps into the race, and then all of a sudden lost power. His power unit decided to cut way back on him, and they were able to Control-Alt-Delete the right number of things and eventually get his power back. But Ricciardo was driving brilliantly, and then he lost power and then put him right back to where he started. So I just felt terrible for Ricciardo.
Yeah, Danny was over half a second slower in qualifying than Norris, obviously in Q2, which was as far as he went in qualifying, which is significant. And there was some analysis done, and his pace through turn one of the largest braking areas on the track, was comparable to Norris's. So somehow he was losing massive amounts of time through the rest of the lap. And so he performed better in France, but his struggles with trying to get comfortable in the McLaren are certainly not over by a long stretch. But you're right, it was very unfortunate. He was racy at the beginning. That power unit issue, I don't know if when they made the fix, whether it reoccurred, because he never looked racy again, did he, after that power unit issue?
Right.
And he was struggling. So I don't know if it affected him throughout the whole Grand Prix. But yeah, he's not having a lot of luck, unfortunately. And his teammate is shining quite brightly at the moment. I mean, I thought it was quite interesting how Norris didn't really defend that robustly against Bottas and Perez,
right.
And realised his race was more with Ferrari, and just comfortably brought it home in 5th place without being too troubled. So comfortably best of the rest, and is doing a great job, which is only making Ricciardo's struggles more apparent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's so far this season making it look like he's Verstappen and or Hamilton, and Ricciardo is Bottas or Perez, and you're like, whoa, that's not at all jiving with what we expected.
Right, that's right. So Ferrari were quite a surprise, weren't they, this weekend? I mean, they basically reversed their fortunes from Paul Ricard. They qualified relatively poorly, but raced really well, and finished a strong 6th and 7th place, and that was despite Charles Leclerc having an incident on lap 1 with Pierre Gasly that necessitated a pit stop and put him all the way back to
and also seemed to be his fault, wouldn't you think?
When you drive into people, yeah, absolutely. It was a bit of a boneheaded move, which was why the number of votes he managed to secure for driver of the day was somewhat questionable. I mean, it was a great recovery drive, but you shouldn't put yourself in that position, because he probably would have got 6th or maybe even 5th if he'd managed to finish lap 1 cleanly. But yeah, the Ferrari really was significantly so much stronger in the race and was so much kinder to the tyres throughout the race. It was really quite surprising. It's a low deg circuit, Austria, and it certainly seemed to suit the Ferrari a lot more, at least over a race distance. So it was good to see them bounce back, but they didn't quite have enough for Norris. And then the bottom of the top 10, we had three different constructors there. Stroll securing 8th, Alonso 9th, and Tsunoda 10th. And that midfield battle was pretty tough throughout the Grand Prix, wasn't it? And as I mentioned earlier, Russell, until lap 28, was in the thick of it, running a really strong 8th place, and looked like he had probably a little bit more pace than Alonso, because Russell had started on the medium compound tyre and Alonso was on the soft.
That's right.
And then, unfortunately, he had some mechanical woes of his own. It looks like it was he had loss of air pressure that basically is the engine valving, is an air pressure system.
It's a pneumatic system. That's right.
That's right. And so they had to keep topping that up, and ultimately the car had to be retired, which was a huge shame, because that was the best performance from a Williams for a long, long time.
So I incorrectly tweeted about this, that it was George Russell was plagued with a hydraulic issue. I meant pneumatic, and obviously with tweets, alas, what can you do? But George Russell was the only one that I felt worse for than Daniel Ricciardo, because he was running 8th, and all of a sudden he has to come into the pits and hang out in the pits for 25 seconds to get air pressure boost back up, and then runs along just to have to do that again. So all of a sudden he's mired down in the back when he was running well into the points again. And there's been a couple of times where you could argue that he was in the points and then just nerves got the best of him and he made mistakes to lose his place in the points over his 2 or 3 years in racing. But this, obviously, there was nothing he could do, and it was gut-wrenching to see that happen. Though George Russell was another one that had been in the news of sorts. Nothing is confirmed, but there's a lot of talk about whether he's going to be in the Mercedes next year. And his own response to that was, the good thing for me is I take comfort in knowing that I will definitely be in Formula One next year. So basically it sounds like Williams has made it clear that there is a spot for him if the Mercedes thing doesn't work out. He's got a safety school, you could say.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. So first of all, you can't do any more than he did to burnish your credentials, right? To qualify, just outside the top 10 in a Williams, and then race it that hard for third of the race is certainly going to help your resume. And then it was interesting how Hamilton was quizzed on. He mentioned that he's already started contract negotiations with Mercedes for next year and beyond. And then they asked about his teammate, and he was talking at Valtteri and saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it, type of thing. And then they asked him specifically about Russell, and he said, well, Russell's not my teammate. I've got nothing to say on that. So I thought that was a pretty interesting...
Right. It's but you're aware of him, right? Like, he also races in Formula One, correct?
So definitely things are going on. I don't know. Yeah, it will be a brave decision by Mercedes to get rid of Valtteri and replace him with Russell, but you kind of think it might be overdue.
When I saw that headline that Hamilton wants Bottas to stay in the car, I was instantly reminded of when Vettel wanted Raikkonen to stay in the Ferrari. That was the first thing that came right to, and I'm thinking to myself, Hamilton, really? Because Hamilton's he's famous, you could say, for saying, I don't care who my teammate is, and I don't need any special treatment. As long as it's fair, I'll race anybody, and I'll just win on merit, right? That's not the language that Hamilton was giving off just now.
That's true, but I don't think ultimately he's going to block any driver from taking the second seat. He's never been that type of driver, and I don't think he's going to start now, and nor do I think he's that perturbed about George Russell being in the other seat. I think it's more a question of it's been proven that Mercedes have probably been a stronger outfit when they've operated more of a number one, number two driver arrangement than having, two number ones, which is, go back to 2016 where Rosberg was doing everything in his power to upset Hamilton and to disrupt his flow. And that's definitely counterproductive when you're fighting, a really, really top draw driver and team in the form of Verstappen and Red Bull. So I think it's more, do we really have the capacity to have, a really young, aggressive driver in the team that's going to do everything to win for himself when we probably need to be working together. But I agree, that is a difference from Hamilton's posture in the past. Maybe old age is catching up with him.
Listen, you can do two things in this world. You can age or you can not. And I'm certainly going to choose aging for as long as I can, but it's just inevitable, I'm wondering if Hamilton just didn't like the idea of his teammate being a lot taller than him. That's what... Because Russell, I think he's more like my height. George, he might even be more than 6 feet tall. Maybe that's the issue, that he doesn't want the car to have a longer wheelbase so it can fit George Russell's legs, perhaps. I'm clutching his straw. Does that help? It's fascinating to see because we have an example of George Russell in the Mercedes. We saw it in Bahrain last year, and he was impressively quick. And he obviously didn't have tons of experience in the car, probably has a decent amount in the simulator, but obviously that's not the exact same thing either. So there could be an intimidation factor, and there could be that like dual number one status cluttering up the works type of thing. And there could be maybe not necessarily intimidation of wanting clear number one status, but maybe Hamilton really wants to be able to have focus on going after his 8th championship. And if he's got a young hot shoe as a teammate, maybe he thinks that might gum up the works a bit, and he doesn't have quite as much leverage as he does right now. So not necessarily parity in terms of on-track capability, but in terms of like say in like the direction the car goes inherently. I don't know. I'm speculating at this point.
Yeah, I think, in reality, even if Mercedes were to put Russell in the car for next year, he's not going to... I don't think he would be able to launch a title bid in his first season in a top seat, in a top car. So there could be a development aspect to it, but I think ultimately the car gets developed by whoever's driving it the fastest. And I would be very surprised if Mercedes didn't continue to develop it in the way Hamilton wants, certainly for next year, more than their new driver. But ultimately, I think you've got to start thinking about a succession plan sooner or later, haven't you? Bottas isn't it. We all know that. He's now, I think, a defined number 2 driver. So at what point do you start to think we really need to have the next generation in the other seat and ready to take over when Hamilton retires?
Right, and be comfortable in the car and ready to go right after it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and maybe Mercedes want to try and get the deal with Hamilton done, and then they'll start to think about the second seat, and in that order, which would be very logical. And Toto is a logical man, but it was interesting how he was sort of saying, "Oh, we don't need to think about driver contracts at this point. We can think about that later in the year," contradicting what he'd said, a little bit earlier in the season when he just signed the deal with Hamilton on the eve of this year's first race. So he said, well, we've got to get it done much earlier this year. So clearly there's a lot going on there, a lot to think about. But it's certainly not going to be Ocon in the second Mercedes. We know that, because not only has he signed a new deal with Alpine, but he's also reverted to being quite slow relative to his teammates. So
it's been kind of shocking just how so in sync those things were, that he gets a new long-term contract and has dreadful performance the next 2 Grand Prix. I mean, that obviously he wants to turn that around quickly. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about...
On that point, that's not the first time it's happened. I've seen that happen many times, where a driver has been rewarded with a new contract who immediately just goes AWOL for like multiple races. It's happened over many seasons with many drivers. It's a really weird thing.
I
don't know
saw it
why.
happen several times with Nick Heidfeld. Nick Heidfeld was just insanely good at somehow finding speed when contracts were on the line. And then once it was signed, he didn't seem to be there anymore. It was bizarre.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a few. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but that is a good one. There's been a number over the years. It's weird.
Certainly, yeah. But Ocon's wasn't, here's another year. Ocon's was for 3 years, I think, right?
Yeah, 3-year deal. Absolutely bizarre. And, Alonso's, barely found out where the kettle is in the Alpine cafeteria, and you're already handing out his teammate a 3-year deal. Ridiculous.
Alonso's going to be the first one I offer an iced tea to.
Well, in Enstone,
you can't find the kettle anyway. Get some ice. It's warm outside. It's refreshing. So what about Vettel and Stroll? They ended up finishing. Stroll got to Q3. Vettel did not. I bet Vettel was just barely out. But Stroll ended up getting a few points. Vettel was outside of the points. It seemed a little bit lopsided again.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Lance has bounced back, right? He's had a couple of tough Grand Prix, and his teammate's been doing well, and we needed to see a slightly stronger weekend from him, and he delivered. And Vettel certainly, I mean, it wasn't a disastrous weekend for him, but it is certainly, being beaten by Kimi Räikkönen's not probably where he was expecting to be, or a rookie in the form of Tsunoda. So definitely a weaker weekend for Vettel, and Stroll was back sort of more where you would expect him to be, right in the thick of the midfield. Maybe the certain demands of the circuit are proving to be more difficult for the drivers that have switched. So again, we talked about Danny Ricciardo having a struggle this weekend, and so did Vettel, although Alonso bucked that trend, and so did Carlos. So it was 2-2, and those who did well and those who struggled. So I've just disproved my own theory there. But yeah, definitely a weaker weekend for Vettel.
Yeah. Well, we've got, just a few days before Friday practice starts at the Austrian Grand Prix. Do you have any final thoughts about the Styrian Grand Prix?
Well, I think definitely I'm not a fan of running back-to-back races at the same track. And I think if you're going to do it, you have to have the capacity to run a different circuit layout. I mean, we saw how successful that was in Bahrain last year. We ran the same track but different circuit configurations, and it resulted in 2 really good weekends. We got lucky in Austria last year because we had a wet race and a dry race. And at Silverstone we had tyre maladies that mix things up, but I'm not keen on it. And if we have a copy paste repeat, it will be a bit of a stain on the F1 season for this year, I would think.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how much changing the tires makes a difference, or perhaps if a cooler weather zone comes in and changes things up. There's potential. We saw that we could have a different result if the weather's different enough and the tire's different. If those things both change in the same way, would both change in the same direction, we could have some potential interesting racing come our way. But those are big ifs right now.
Absolutely.
But so I wanted to switch gears just a little bit to mention that there was another race that was held this past weekend, and that was the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. And it was won, overall record was won by a man named Robin Shute. Actually, I don't know. It could be a woman. Actually, I think it's a man, though. But I actually do not know that driver, who that is exactly. So he or she is named Robin, and let's just go ahead and assume it's a he, just for my own sense of masculine name stability. I don't I don't want to be alone out here. So anyway, but our good friend, our friend Rob Holland also competed in that hill climb. And I'm trying to get in touch with him. Hopefully, we can get him on the podcast to tell us a little bit more about it. So I'm currently in the process of trying to schedule something with him, but he is most likely just recovering from several very long days in a row. So that's what's happening there. I also wanted to talk about my latest YouTube video. It is not a Toyota, sir. I spent a couple days in the Karma GS-6L, and the Karma is what was once known as the Fisker Karma. Henrik Fisker, the designer who started this company, went bankrupt in 2014, and this Chinese auto parts supplier Wang Xing bought the assets and took the vehicle name and made that the company name. And so the Fisker Karma became the Karma Revaro, and then it became the Revaro or Revaro GT, and now that same car effectively is now called the GS-6, and you can get a -6 or a -6L or a -6S, and I had a -6L, and it was a very interesting and enjoyable car to drive, and an interesting video to make. So that's what's going on my YouTube channel right now. I do please ask you to check it out and let me know what you think. And
so Robin is a man, and he is a British man, actually, 23 years old, born in Norwich, and yes, he's done a variety of different racing categories.
I'm very. That was my guess that he was English, and because the name Robin seems to be majority masculine in the UK and then majority feminine here in the US. So you're probably the wrong side of the pond then.
I
thought I was really starting to think that I was until I learned this whole iced tea thing just blew everything up for me. I was all ready to be for Queen and Country, and then just the lack of ice and tea combined just really threw things for a loop. So, and I also mushy peas didn't help, if I'm honest.
Yeah, that is more of a northern English thing than a.
The only place I had that was in London.
Yeah, they're just trying to be northern in whatever restaurant you visited there.
Can't think of a better way to end. I want to thank you for listening. Please take a moment to review us on iTunes or on whatever platform you get our podcast. Please leave comments on the episode of your choice by going to funwithcars.com. As always, I can be reached at feedback@funwithcars.com. Tweet us at fun_with_cars, and check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/FWCars. Chris, just a lovely afternoon and a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
I'm Robin Warner. Goodbye.